Alright, so the summer sale is now in full swing, and I've decided to just go nuts on a whole bunch of new game purchases. However, right out of the gate for the first round of games that I would buy during the summer sale, I did have one rule, and that rule was that it had to be games that I had not played before or experienced in any way whatsoever. So every single game on this list is completely new to me, even if a couple of them were technically games that I think I already owned physically on another platform, but just hadn't gotten around to playing yet, but I found a really good deal. So right out of the gate, the first game that I picked up was actually one that I think a few of you have recommended in the comments, and I just kind of glossed over it, but I really shouldn't have, because it's one of the weirdest, most challenging games that I've played in a while, and that is Pizza Tower, on sale for $14.99 rather than its normal $19.99. Now, the thing about any game that has tower in its name is that I kind of have this unfair aversion to it, because I always assume if the word tower is in the name that it's probably going to be a tower defense game. But I was completely wrong, and this is a stupidly fun platformer that is kind of a surreal, unholy mix of Wario, Mario, Super Meat Boy, and Sonic the Hedgehog. All of this is to say that the mechanics definitely take some getting used to, and I was struggling with the initial tutorial, but it kind of makes sense that I would struggle with it, considering that it kind of bucks the trend of, you just have a guy that goes fast, jumps, double jumps, and might hurl some projectiles here and there. It's an extremely refreshing take on the standard 2D platformer, and it's just oozing with style. Also, I should point out that the way each level plays out, where you sort of have to zip into the tower, solve platforming challenges, and then snatch up pizza loot before making an escape to get back out of the level, is completely brilliant. And as soon as you complete your first escape, you'll see how all of the mechanics sort of click into place. I found myself exploring more slowly at first, but then on the return trip, that mental map you've created of each of the rooms that you've already traversed kind of snaps back into sharp focus as you try to claw your way back out of the tower before something bad happens. I'm not sure what. I haven't gotten to a place yet where I've been pursued by something, but it feels like something's going to start chasing me, and it is harrowing. Stylistically, it's really unique as well, with, I don't know, sort of like a Microsoft Paint hand-drawn aesthetic. And something about the way they've blended these visuals with tight animation and a bonkers off-the-wall premise really brings it all together in a satisfying way. Also, I think I forgot to mention the premise is that you're a pizza chef named Peppino Spaghetti, who's trying to prevent a nuclear laser from a nearby tower from destroying your pizzeria. So, yeah, definitely a weird premise. And this makes the whole thing feel like a 90s Nicktoons throwback, and I just couldn't stop thinking about shows that I watched as a kid like Rocko's Modern Life, Ren and Stimpy, or Real Monsters. It's completely nonsensical, challenging but forgiving, and I can already tell I'm going to get absolutely obsessed with this one. And deck performance is perfectly solid at 60 FPS without breaking a sweat. Next up, stepping away from retro 2D throwbacks that kind of harken back to Nickelodeon, is something a little bit more modern that I do have a physical copy of on the PS5. I just never got around to playing it, and I figured, hey, since it's on sale now and I've enjoyed playing other PlayStation games that got ported to PC, this one's probably going to be a really good time too, and I wanted to see how it would perform on the deck, and that is Kena Bridge of Spirits. Right now it's about $15.99, down from $39.99, so a savings of about 60%. And again, I did already have this game technically, but I just kept not getting around to it. But because I've been having so much fun replaying Spider-Man lately, and just generally, again, love seeing PlayStation Studios games make their way to the PC, I figured I'd go ahead and take the leap on this one as well, and finally see what it's all about. You'll play as Kena, a young spirit guide who uses her abilities to help spirits move on from the physical world. Along with the standard action platforming you'd expect, Kena also gradually collects rot, which serves as spirit companions that can help you clear out corruption, solve environmental puzzles, or you can just sort of chill with these little guys and watch them dance if you want. So far the gameplay feels pretty good. It's a little bit Soulsian, a little bit Zelda, but all of it's just super charming. At first I was skeptical because I thought the gameplay and environments felt a little bit simplistic, but after making it through the opening section, it's clear that the game's opening up a lot more than I expected, and while I'm sure it's still going to be pseudo-linear for the most part, I'm totally okay with that and love a good short adventure every bit as some sprawling Tears of the Kingdom-esque epic. So far deck performance has been okay, but not exceptional, and you'll most likely need to tweak settings individually to get a solid frame rate, and this is definitely a good candidate for being locked down to 40 FPS with a 40 Hz refresh rate. Also, I did hit some weird bugs starting out that weren't showstoppers, but they were a little bit of a nuisance. The first was that I couldn't navigate the menus very well, and in one case the submenu I was navigating in the foreground wouldn't let me make selections because the cursor was still locked to the previous menu, and I could see those entries being highlighted as I moved the stick around in the background. Also, I had some weird intermittent issues with the audio dropping out during certain cutscenes, so I'm not sure if I'm missing an update or what, but something to keep in mind if you're planning on picking this up for the deck. Next up, while we're on the subject of fantasy games, albeit ones that are top-down, this next one is one that I really should have featured in the top-down action games video a few weeks ago, but the thing is I just hadn't played it despite the fact that it comes highly recommended, and considering it was 75% off at $4.99 instead of $19.99, now seemed like a good time to check out Victor Vran. Now, Victor Vran first came out back in 2015, and then later got brought over to the PS4, Xbox One, and Nintendo Switch, and I'd seen the physical Switch copy so many times at like Best Buy and just passed on it, just because I wasn't familiar, so jumping in at $4.99 here felt like the right time to go ahead and give it a shot. It's an action RPG with an isometric top-down view, and weirdly I was surprised to see that the game does have a jump and wall jump mechanic, which you don't really see too often in games like this. I'm still early in the game, but I have to say it's definitely appealing and feels like a more streamlined experience than what you get out of Diablo 4, though at the expense of some polish. The visuals are stylish, but not technically anything to write home about, and there are some weird quirks that I noticed, like the inventory being a little bit strange to navigate. Also, the voice acting for non-Victor characters is a little bit hit or miss, but Victor himself, as soon as I heard him start talking, I thought he sounded a little too familiar, and I discovered that he's actually voiced by Doug Cockle, who you probably know as Geralt from the Witcher series, and his delivery is exactly as awesome here as it was in The Witcher 3 when I played it, so that was a really nice surprise.
There are survivors after all this time. Castle Zagora still stands, a refuge from the horrors outside.
Combat feels straightforward and has the same sort of kill, loot, repeat loop that you would expect from the genre, just in a more Victorian Gothic aesthetic, which is really great, but it did make me sad that we still don't have a PC port of Bloodborne yet. Still, for $5 I think it's an absolute steal, and in no time at all I was dodge rolling and blasting away at skeletons, phantoms, spiders, and just grinding up for levels. Deck performance was smooth on high settings for the graphics, but it did struggle a bit under ultra settings. I didn't notice a major difference between the two, but if you're looking to set it and forget it, the high settings should be just fine. And again, I know everyone's still kind of wrapped up in Diablo 4 right now, myself included, but if you're looking for an alternative top-down ARPG that lets you live out your demon hunter fantasies and slay legions of otherworldly horrors, I've definitely found worse ways to spend $5. Alright, I know I said I was stepping away from retro 2D throwbacks, but this is technically different. These next couple of games are definitely retro throwbacks, but to completely different eras. And this first one comes from the N64 era, and it's a game that I put on my wish list forever ago, and I kept saying, like, you know what, sooner or later I'm going to pick this up, I'm finally going to take the leap, and it was on sale for 50% off, so it was like $2.89 instead of like $6, and I was like, you know what, let's go ahead and see what this is all about, and that would be Valky 64. Valky 64 is clearly a love letter to Ocarina of Time with really sharp polygonal graphics and an open-world non-linear structure. The premise is that you play as Valky, the last surviving guardian from the armies of the Goddess of Order, after a battle with the armies of the Goddess of Chaos. As you might expect, the Chaos Goddess comes back and you will have to stop her. It's all pretty standard hero will rise sort of fare, but it's a fine enough setup. Now make no mistake, this is a really simple game, but if you have a fondness for the 5th generation era, I think it's worth a look, and predictably plays perfectly smooth on the Steam Deck. Well, I should say that performance-wise it's smooth, because mechanically speaking, it's a little bit awkward to control. Valky can do vertical and horizontal attacks, but you can't jump while your sword is unsheathed, and the act of unsheathing your sword for each initial attack can be a little bit slow. Still, if you want a glimpse back into the history of the action-adventure genre, complete with random side quests for villagers, boss fights, and a really well recreated early 3D Zelda aesthetic, I don't think $3 is too high a price for what's on offer here, so if you have some fondness for the old 3D Zeldas, or if you just never really got to experience that era, it might be a fun experiment. And finally, the last entry on this list is kind of a 3D throwback, but really kind of a 2D throwback, just not in the way that you would expect, and that would be EX Zodiac or X Zodiac, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, but it's essentially a Star Fox clone that was on sale for $7.49 instead of its normal price of $9.99. Now this game represents a low-poly 3D rail shooter that has you facing off against an intergalactic terrorist organization known as Zodiac, hence the name. But honestly, I didn't want this game for the story, I just wanted it for a simpler sort of on-rails experience that I really loved growing up. Not just in the SNES era with Star Fox, or I guess from just a few years ago with Star Fox 2 on the Super NES Classic, but even in the NES era I loved games like Captain Skyhawk that, well, I guess technically that wouldn't have been an on-rail shooter in the same way, but yeah, if you like a low-poly aesthetic, this one's worth checking out for sure, if for no other reason than the attention to detail in recreating the Star Fox experience is really on point. So far it plays great on the Steam Deck, and given its arcadey nature, I think it's just one of those games that's well suited to the handheld format. Plus, since it's not pushing super polished next-gen graphics, you should get a ton of battery life out of it, and it's not going to miss a beat recreating the early wireframe polygon look of the Super FX chip. Also, I was definitely mistaken initially because I was expecting this would probably be a bit of a cakewalk. That is not true though, and the first boss absolutely wiped the floor with me on multiple occasions, so I'm definitely going to have to spend more time with this one if I have any hope of making significant progress in it, because, wow, it's a lot tougher than I expected. But again, if you've got a hankering for that old school Star Fox experience and want to see what a modern version of it might look like, again, assuming you didn't play Star Fox 2 on the Super NES Classic a few years ago, this is definitely worth a look. Alright, and that's it for this one, but hardly the last games that I'll be buying during the summer sale. I'm sure that Gabe's going to get me on a few more by the time this next 2 weeks is over, but again, for this first round of purchases, I really did just want to play some games that I had no familiarity with, and I'm happy to report that almost all of them really resonated with me. Valky 64 maybe isn't the best, but again, if you just want like a throwback to the N64 era, it might be worth a look. I don't know. Personal preference, I guess. But anyways, what about you? What games have you picked up during the summer sale so far? I would love to hear about it. As always, thanks so much for your time. Take care, and I'll see you on the next one.